of the 13 rules of Oakhaven Morgue. I didn't believe in ghosts. As a senior medical student specializing in pathology, death was nothing more to me than a biological process. The cessation of metabolic functions. A corpse was simply a meat machine that had shut down. That is, until I took the night shift at the morgue of Oakhaven General Hospital in Boston. And Oakhaven Hospital is a brutalist architectural monstrosity, built of dreary gray concrete in the 1970s. The morgue is located in basement B3, the deepest, coldest level, completely isolated from the outside world. No cell service, no sunlight, just the overpowering stench of formaldehyde, mingled with the rusty tang of blood and the sickly sweet odor of beginning decomposition. And my duties from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. were straightforward. Receive bodies from the freight elevator, sort them, tag them, push them into the cold storage lockers, and clean the autopsy room. For $45 an hour, I signed the contract without hesitation. The day shift manager tossed me a heavy ring of keys pointed toward the staff break room, and left without so much as a goodbye. And on the rusted metal desk inside the break room, I found a yellowed sheet of paper. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled with deep indentations, as if the writer had been in a state of absolute panic. The title read, "To the one who comes after. Read carefully if you want to see the sun tomorrow." Beneath it was a list. Rule 1. Always monitor the temperature of storage locker. 14. And if it drops below 10°C, turn it back up. If it rises above 5°C, lock the break room door immediately and do not come out until sunrise. Rule 2. Corpses cannot move on their own. If you see an arm slipping out from under a sheet, take the baton, break the joint, and shove it back under. Never touch their bare skin with your own. Rule 3. If the internal phone rings at exactly 3:33 a.m., do not answer it. There is no one working on the upper floors at that hour. Rule 4. When cleaning autopsy room 2, absolutely do not look down the floor drain. Even if you hear someone calling your name from down there, promise me, don't look. Rule 5. If you are walking down the freezer corridor and hear knocking, knock, 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 coming from inside a locker, and knock back exactly twice. Do not knock 3 times. Do not open it. I scoffed, crumpled the paper, and tossed it into the trash can. Just another hazing prank for the new guy by the medical staff, I muttered, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and started my shift. It was the most fatal mistake of my life. The first 2 hours passed uneventfully, and I finished cleaning and sorting 3 new arrivals sent down from the ER. The silence was so profound. I could clearly hear the electrical hum of the flickering fluorescent lights on the ceiling. At 1:45 a.m., a bizarre, bone-deep chill swept through the basement. The heating system seemed to have failed. I blew into my freezing hands, stood up, and began my patrol along the wall of stainless steel body lockers. And as I walked past row number 2, my footsteps faltered. The digital temperature display on the door of locker 14 was flashing rapidly. All the other lockers were sitting at a stable 2°C, but 14, 4°C, 5°C, 7°C, 12°C. The temperature was skyrocketing, as if a massive heat source, a raging fire, was burning inside that narrow steel box meant for a single corpse. And Rule 1. If it rises above 5°C, lock the break room door immediately. The memory of the crumpled note flashed in my mind, but my curiosity and medical student logic overpowered my fear. The circuit board must be shorting out. I couldn't let the body inside rot. I'd be fired instantly. I grasped the freezing steel handle of locker 14 and yanked it hard. And screech. The drawer slid out, a blast of scorching, putrid air, reeking of sulfur and burnt flesh, hit me square in the face. I stumbled backward, coughing violently, on the stainless steel tray. There was no body, it was completely empty, but etched into the gleaming surface of the tray were hundreds of frantic, overlapping, deep fingernail scratches. And at the far end of the tray, a single sentence was written in fresh, dripping blood. "You opened the door for me." I slammed the locker shut, my heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to break free. I sprinted back to the break room, tore through the trash can, smoothed out the crumpled note, and read it again with trembling hands. They weren't joking. These things, they were real. I tried calling the hospital's emergency hotline, but the phone only yielded a dead, soulless dial tone. The line had been cut. I was trapped here on basement level B3 with whatever had just escaped from locker 14, deadbolted the break room door and tightly gripped a heavy steel wrench. Time crawled by like torture at 2:30 a.m., and the morgue's internal intercom system crackled to life with a burst of static. A voice echoed through the desolate hallways. It wasn't the voice of the switchboard operator. It was my mother's voice. She had died of cancer when I was 12, Arthur. My boy, it hurts so much. It's so dark down here, Arthur. Come save me, sweetie. Tears welled up in my eyes, and all rationality was suffocated. The voice was too real. The sobs, the heavy breathing, everything belonged to my mother. It was coming from the direction of autopsy room 2, like a sleepwalker. I unlocked the break room, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out into the pitch-black corridor. The fluorescent lights had completely died. The only illumination came from the harsh red glow of the exit signs, and casting grotesque shadows across the floor. I entered autopsy room 2. The air was thick with the suffocating smell of bleach. In the center of the room sat the cold steel autopsy table. There was no one there, Arthur. I'm right here. Look at me, sweetie. The voice echoed upward from beneath the floorboards. I aimed the flashlight down. Rule 4. Absolutely do not look down the floor drain. My heart screamed at me to run, but my flashlight beam was already shining directly into the brass floor. Drain in the center of the room. The drain used to flush away blood and bodily fluids during autopsies. In the beam of light peering up through the rusted brass grate, I saw an eye. It was the size of a tennis ball, devoid of eyelids. The black pupil dilated to consume the entire eyeball, and, heavily bloodshot, it was staring unblinkingly up at me from the depths of the drain. Such a good boy, the mouth hidden in the darkness whispered, accompanied by the wet, squelching sound of raw meat. It was no longer my mother's voice, but a deep, inhuman, guttural grinding, like two boulders scraping together. Instantly, something long and slimy, a black tentacle covered in razor-sharp and jagged hooks shot up through the grate and coiled tightly around my ankle. It yanked! I slammed face first onto the tiled floor, the flashlight skittering away. It dragged me violently toward the drain with terrifying strength. I screamed, my hands frantically clawing at the steel legs of the autopsy table. My fingernails tore, bleeding profusely. Let me go! Oh God, let me go! I swung the wrench in my free hand, battering the slimy appendage with hysterical force. Thick black sludge splattered everywhere. With every strike, the drain let out an ear-piercing, high-pitched screech. Finally, it released me, slithering back down into the abyssal depths of the pipe. I crawled out of room 2 on my hands and knees, and locked the door tight, my entire body drenched in cold sweat and my own blood. I dragged myself back to the break room and bandaged the gash on my ankle with medical gauze. The pain was excruciating, as if thousands of needles were piercing my bone marrow. I stared intently at the wall clock. The second hand ticked on. Tick-tock, tick-tock. 3:32 a.m., and the air in the basement became dense, almost viscous. The cold seeped through my skin, making me shiver violently. I glanced at the sweat-stained rule sheet on the desk. Rule 3. If the internal phone rings at exactly 3:33 a.m., do not answer it. The very moment the minute hand clicked to 3:33, ring, 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 the dusty black rotary phone in the corner of the room suddenly screamed to life, and the shrill ringing tore through the dead silence of the night, hammering against my eardrums like a sledgehammer. I huddled into the corner of the room, clutching my head, eyes squeezed shut. Don't answer it. You will die if you answer it, Arthur. The ringing was persistent, relentless. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes. It showed no signs of stopping, but then the sound of the ring changed. It was no longer a mechanical ringing. It warped into the sound of a newborn baby crying. Wah! Wah! The wailing was agonized, pitiful, crackling out from the plastic speaker of the phone. I couldn't take it anymore. The psychological strain had reached its breaking point. I lunged forward, intending to rip the phone cord right out of the wall socket. But just as my fingers brushed the cord, the receiver of the phone slowly lifted into the air. Elevated by an unseen force, it hovered right in front of my face. From the other end of the line, there was no more baby crying, only a heavy, wet, wheezing breath, like a man with a crushed chest trying to drag air into pulverized lungs. Open locker number 1. For me. I know you're in there. I scrambled backward in horror. Simultaneously, bang! A deafening crash echoed from the heavy steel door of the break room. Something outside in the hallway had just slammed into the door with colossal force. The hinges groaned in protest. Bang! 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 Let me in! I'm so cold! You're making me so cold! A distorted, growling voice snarled from the other side. Beneath the narrow gap under the door, I saw a thick, black, viscous substance slowly seeping into the room. I backed away. White, knuckling the wrench, the steel door began to buckle inward. It wouldn't hold much longer. I needed an escape route. The air vent, there was a small ventilation grate on the ceiling of the break room, and ignoring my agonizing ankle, I scrambled onto the desk, used the wrench to pry off the rusted grate, and hauled myself inside. The exact second I pulled my feet up, the steel break room door was torn completely, off its hinges, crashing violently to the floor, through the slats of the air. Vent. I peered down. What entered the room wasn't some monstrous creature. It was one of the 3 corpses I had personally sorted at the beginning of my shift. It was the body of a young man from a severe car crash. His skull was completely caved in, and one eye hung loosely from its socket. He was walking with a twisted, jerky gait, his shattered bones grinding and snapping with every movement. His skin was the pallid waxen white of a frozen corpse, but the most horrifying detail was, he had no shadow. The dim light from the desk lamp shone directly on him, yet cast absolutely nothing onto the floor. The corpse stopped dead in the center of the room. Its crushed head slowly tilted upward, further and further back, until its neck snapped completely backward, resting against its spine, its one intact, milky eye stared directly into the air vent where I was hiding. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque, ear-to-ear grin, revealing a maw of blood-stained teeth. "You knocked on the wrong one," it whispered. I held my breath, biting my lip until it bled to stifle a scream, and slowly began to crawl backward into the pitch-black, claustrophobic ventilation shaft. I shimmied through the maze of dusty, cobweb-filled ductwork, praying to find a way out to the emergency stairwell. I crawled for what felt like an eternity through the suffocatingly tight duct, my claustrophobia pushing me to the brink of a panic attack. Suddenly, the vent beneath my stomach gave way. The rusted rivets snapped. I plummeted about 10 feet in freefall, slamming hard onto a freezing tiled floor. As the dizziness faded, I forced my eyes open. I had dropped right into the corridor of the dead, the massive hallway housing the 100 main cold storage lockers of Oakhaven Morgue, and it was in this moment that I wished the fall had killed me. Along both sides of the endlessly long, pitch-black corridor echoed a sound I will take with me to the grave. Knock, 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 knocking. Not just one, but dozens of knocks. They were coming from inside the sealed steel lockers. Knock, knock, knock. Rule 5. If you are walking down the freezer corridor and hear knocking, knock, 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 coming from inside a locker, knock back exactly twice. But which one was I supposed to knock on? There were dozens of lockers vibrating violently, as dead hands battered against the steel from within, and the sound of fingernails screeching against metal, muffled groans, and wretched wailing converged into a maddening symphony of hell. The digital temperature displays on every single locker were climbing at a terrifying speed. 5C, 10C, 20C. I could feel thousands of unseen eyes glaring at me from the darkness. Abruptly, the knocking stopped in unison, and the corridor fell into an absolute suffocating silence. a silence far more terrifying than the noise. Screech, screech. Simultaneously, dozens of heavy steel drawers slowly began to slide open. In the gloom, I saw pallid waxen arms and stiff, dead legs dangling over the sides of the trays. They were sitting up. My mind snapped. Primal survival instinct took over. I let out a feral roar and bolted down the length of the corridor, sprinting toward the heavy emergency exit door, illuminated by a flickering red exit sign. I ran a gauntlet of emaciated, naked phantoms reaching out to grab me. Freezing, jagged fingernails tore at my clothes and raked across my back. I threw my entire body weight against the crash bar of the exit door, bursting through, and scrambled up the concrete stairwell with the frantic speed of a madman. I ran, tripped, crawled on all fours, and kept running until I violently pushed through the final doors into the main lobby of the hospital. The blinding, scorching light of the morning sun hit my face. I collapsed in the center of the lobby, gasping for air, and under the horrified stares of the morning shift nurses. I quit on the spot, abandoned my medical career entirely, and moved to another state. I was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. PSD, the Police and Hospital Administration, investigated the basement, following my frantic claims. They confirmed the steel door to the break room was indeed broken, but attributed it to rusted hinges. All the corpses were found exactly where they were supposed to be, resting peacefully in their lockers. The temperature across the board read a steady 2°C. They concluded I had suffered a severe psychotic break due to academic stress, combined with isolation in an enclosed space. Only. I knew the truth, and there is one thing I never told the police, as I was packing up my things to leave the hospital for good. I asked the day shift manager about the identity of my predecessor, the one who had left the rule sheet on the desk. He looked at me as if I were crazy. "What are you talking about?" There was no predecessor. That night shift position has been vacant for 5 years, ever since the last guy, Frank, vanished without a trace in the middle of his shift. The cops searched everywhere they figured he skipped town over gambling debts. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I remembered that crumpled, frantic note. I remembered the skyrocketing temperature, the empty locker, number 14. Frank didn't skip town, he had been caught, and that night, with my own 2 hands, I had opened the door of locker 14 for him, or for whatever had taken possession of his body, and let it out,